There's the link. There's the link.
Is that the same one?
Yeah.
315? It's 324.
Yeah.
All right. All right, so you're live. But are your patrons notified? That's the question. Post. Scheduled. Oh, what if you click on scheduled?
Yeah.
That's where you already are, huh?
Yeah.
What are those three icons under your Cryptodamus guy there?
Messages, new posts, or settings.
It might be under.
That's going to be like all my account settings and stuff like that. That's like, yeah, we don't want to go in there.
Okay.
Okay. Fuck it, man. Let's just go. This is going to take all day to figure this out.
All right.
So let's just go back to Skype and.
Okay.
And
I'm sorry. I'll ask around some other people.
Yeah, we'll see if we can figure it out. Okay, so luckily I have some extra time today until at least 5.
Okay.
So yeah, I didn't do much prep here, so but you know we can we're just gonna wing it. So what should we work on? What would you like to work on?
I mean, everything. I don't know.
Let me go back to. Sorry, let me go back to. Let me look at our messaging and just refresh my memory here.
I mean, so I basically gave you like a giant list. Then you said you need to focus on planets and the signs first, but that we can look at some charts, like
wait, hang on a second.
Famous people charts, like Donald Trump, or what did you say? Football player, I think.
Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Okay, you wanna look at some charts?
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, yeah, because like it's like I don't know, like in terms of the planets and signs, it's like I get it until it comes to one that doesn't make sense or is sort of difficult. Like, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Like it's like, oh yeah, I get it just fine when I'm looking at one that I understand. But then if you said like describe Saturn and Pisces, like I wouldn't be able to.
Okay. So, but you know you know the planets and you know the signs, but you don't understand how they work together.
Not necessarily. I mean, only in the ones that make sense together.
Got it. But you know the planets.
Yes.
Okay. Let's go over the planets actually. So I sent you this PowerPoint presentation, but I don't know if it got through to you.
When? Oh yeah, I don't have it yet.
Okay.
When did you send that?
I sent it, but I sent it with this big audio file too, and maybe it didn't. It was too big to go through.
Did you send it to Gmail?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have it.
Okay. Well, you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we're just gonna whip through the planets here pretty quick.
Okay.
Here's Tom Brady's chart. Actually, we can look at that. But so first of all, you need to know the glyphs, right? You can't just know, the sun means this. You have to. Astrology is, it's a language, right? So if we look at the chart here, this is, what is this? This is a very complex language, essentially, right? If we scroll down here, you can see it's very mathematical. Whoops. It's very mathematical. There's all of these, glyphs, and that's annoying. And configurations here, because it's off the slide. Right, so basically, you're trying to learn a language. You are trying to become fluent in a language, and that takes time and practice. And with astrology, it takes a long time. It's just like, it takes years, actually, years of study, right? So you got to go slow and take your time, and it will come, with time and study and practice. And looking at lots of charts. Like, try to look at a chart every day. Go to Astro Dance and see whose birthday it is today, or pick a favorite person, a favorite athlete, a favorite movie star, and do a search for them. I can show you how to do that a little bit later if you want to. But basically, essentially, right, you want to learn how to read this. So you need to learn how to speak and read a language. That's kind of my approach to astrology is, this isn't a religion, this isn't a philosophy, this isn't a belief system. This is a map of what's happening in the sky. And it's putting, the astronomical information into an astrological language, right? So it's taking astronomical planetary positions and alignments, and it's turning that into a language. So essentially, you need to learn a language. And, this is what is the birth chart, right? It's a blueprint of karma, and it's a map of psychological and physical energy patterns, okay? So that's kind of just the basic, thing. So, of course, the sun, we're just going to kind of whip through here, but you have to learn the glyphs. So I would recommend, number one, making some flashcards. And, with the glyph on one side and then the name and all the different layers of meaning. So you can have primary meaning, secondary meaning, tertiary meaning, or you can have primary meaning, and then you can have the more subtle aspects, because it's so many layers in the archetypes, right? But you have to learn the glyphs. Do you know the glyphs?
I think I do, yeah.
Okay. All right, so that's good.
This point, yeah.
Yeah, so let's just go through the planets pretty quick. I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to just test you and see where you're at. So you tell me what the sun, what you think the sun means, and then I'll show you what I have on my slide.
Okay. So the sun is actually the one that's the hardest one for me, but which is weird because it's like the one everyone looks up, the sun sign, right? I know it's supposed to mean your identity, like in the core of who you are.
Yes, that's exactly right.
But I also feel like it means sunshine, like shedding light on something.
Yes, that's true too. Okay, that's good. So you have the basic symbolism. It's the center of the solar system, so it's the center of our personality construct. It's the center of our identity. So identity is also like, I'm just going to put in here, identity. The sun is your like one of the core. It's the center of your identity construct. It's the conscious will, the conscious center of your personality, the core identity, the essence of who you are. The sun is at the center of the solar system, so you have to remember all the other planets just revolve around the sun. Okay? So the sun is the center, the main thing. They're all in the gravitational field of the sun. And even all the other planets, they're just reflecting the sun's light back at us. I do a little medical astrology, which is its basic vitality and life energy. It's also the heart function, right? Which is like, you can't live without a heart. You can have problems with all your other organ systems, but if you have a heart problem, right, that's like your whole identity is threatened as a living person. So the heart, together with the moon, those are called the luminaries, right? The sun and the moon, those are the ones that are shining the most light, so they're the most important. And the sun, the moon, and the rising sign really. That's your core. That's your identity construct, right? Then the other planets are going to be, more different aspects of your personality. But those three are the core identity construct. So it's really important to understand dignity and rulership of the planets and the signs. If you really want to understand signs and how the system works between the planets and the signs, you have to understand dignity, which Robert Hand, talks about. I think, I don't remember if Stephen Forrest talks about it much, but Robert Hand definitely talks about it because it's very important, right? So the sun rules Leo. So the sun does very well in Leo. Do you know why? I mean, aside from the fact that the symbolism has a lot of similarities, but what is the essence of why the sun is so matched up well with Leo and rules Leo?
I don't know.
Well, Leo is the heart, is the middle of the summer, right? This is a seasonal system. So the sun is literally at its hottest and brightest, at least in the northern hemisphere, and this is a northern hemispheric system. The sun is literally the hottest in Leo. So this is, you have to remember that astrology is a system of observation. It's all based on empirical observations. The sun is literally the most powerful in Leo in the summer. So that, makes sense, right? It all makes sense when you think about it like that. It's exalted in Aries, which is, of course, another fire sign. The sun in general does well in all the fire signs. But Aries is the beginning of spring, which is actually, it's Mars's sign. And Mars and the sun are both young, male, dynamic, activated spirit, warm energies. And the first day of spring is when the sun is really coming back to life, right? So the sun, of course, does well in Leo and Aries. So these are just very basic symbolisms for how the system works. Are you having a hearing problem there?
Not too much. I'm just,
okay.
Yeah, I'm just listening. I don't want to turn it up too loud. I guess I could, but yeah.
So the sun is in its detriment in Aquarius, unfortunately for me, because I'm an Aquarius. Now, why is that? Because the Aquarius is the dead of winter. So the sun is literally weakened in Aquarius. I mean, really, you could say, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, it's weakened in all three of those signs, especially Aquarius and Pisces. Not as much in Capricorn, but Capricorn's pretty cold, so not a great placement for the sun. It's in its fall in Libra, which is opposite its exaltation. Why? And that's also the beginning of fall. So again, that's when the sun's energy is waning. So the system kind of makes really sense. It's just important to understand those things about how the system works. Okay, so let's talk about the moon. This is the glyph for the moon. What do you know about the moon? This is really, we can't really go much further until we just, until we establish the basic foundation. And I come back and restudy this over and over and over again. You can never understand it will evolve and grow over 20 years. I'm still studying the planetary archetypes. So it's not like, this is just for beginners. You can't do astrology unless you understand this part. If you don't understand the planets, you're just not going to get very far. And your mind can only grok a certain amount of information at a time, right? It's like you're not going to get all the subtleties only come after years of study of the archetypes, right? Okay, so what do you know for the moon?
Let's see. Emotional expression.
Yeah.
Container, the matrix, maybe embodiment, maybe motherhood.
Yes. Yeah, so it's a female archetype, so it's the mother archetype. It represents femininity in general, women in general. It represents our emotional programming. Our childhood, the moon represents our childhood, our emotional patterns and emotional programming that we brought with us, karmically, but also through our family, because those things are all one seamless archetype. We got emotionally patterned at home by our mother, in our childhood, right? So it's all one thing. So it all represents that kind of one thing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a symbol, of female fertility, the female reproductive system, the menstrual cycle, these all go along with the moon too. But also primary, is also especially is emotional patterns, how we experience emotions, how we work with emotional energy is the moon. But in a man's chart, it also represents his relationships to his mother, his relationship to women in general. So if the moon is impaired in a man's chart, like if you have for instance, if you have a moon Saturn conjunction in a male's chart, that's going to tell you the person probably had either family trauma or some difficulties with the mother, with the family, and that person probably has difficulties in intimate relationships with women. Now, that could be modified by a million other factors. like the seventh house, Venus, and Venus also. So it's not cut and dry. It's just one of several factors that you would have to look at. So deeper unconscious elements of our personality, whereas the sun is more of the conscious, why we think we do things. The moon is actually why we do things, or like the deeper unconscious reasons that we may or may not be aware of why we're doing things, why we're reacting to people the way we are. So emotional programming, emotional life, like I said, childhood, home, where we find nurturing and comfort. So you can literally tell what type of home someone lives in by looking at their moon. Like whether they have a big, whether they live on a big piece of property, whether they will own their own home, whether they're more like live in a tiny house that's more like uncomfortable. Like the moon in Capricorn maybe is not going to be as good as someone who has the moon in Cancer, as their home is going to be extremely important to them. Medical illness, medical related to the menstrual cycle, fertility, pregnancy and lactation, reproduction, but also the stomach and the digestion. So the moon rules Cancer. That's a very close, mix between the sign and the planet. It's exalted in Taurus. It's at its detriment in Capricorn, right? Capricorn is a very cold and sort of like not very into emotional expression, or really if you understand Capricorn, the sign itself, it's like it's not very emotional. It's not really interested in emotional connection. So the moon just doesn't really get to express itself well in Capricorn. It's in its fall in Scorpio, which is kind of like the opposite problem. It's like melodrama. Scorpio is extremely emotional. So it's both of those are like the moon is somewhat unbalanced, right? In Capricorn, it's like repressed, and in Scorpio, it's overly expressing.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask you, what's the difference between detriment and fall, because it sounds so similar.
So detriment is the sign that's opposing the ruler. The sign opposite the ruler will always be the detriment. And fall will always be the sign opposite of the exaltation.
But you're saying detriment means it's not very well expressed, and fall means it's like expressed negatively.
No, the moon specifically in those signs.
Okay.
That's not a general rubric for detriment or fall. I'm saying that's specific to the moon in detriment in Capricorn. For another planet in detriment, it might be a different problem.
Fall, right?
Okay, so for another planet in detriment, it might be a totally different problem. I'm just talking about the moon in Capricorn. Okay. That's the problem for the moon in Capricorn. But detriment is always the opposite of the rulership. And fall is always the opposite of exaltation. So you have to kind of memorize those and learn them. And it just basically tells you what planets what sign planets excel in, and they have dignity and power, and what planets, the moon, what sign a planet is, its functioning is very impaired. And then other sign moon placements without dignity could kind of go either way.
Okay.
But if you have planets that have dignity by rulership or exaltation, those are powerful planets in your chart that are function at an extremely high level. Now, they could have afflictions from other problems, okay, from aspects. But just by sign, that indicates something very special. And your planets that are in detriment or fall, those planets, those are their weaknesses. They're problematic. They're problems that you have to manage, okay? So, some people have no dignity. You see a lot of charts, they have no planets in dignity, right? And then some people you look, they have, 4 or 5 planets with dignity. So those are huge differences between charts that really mean something. Most people have 1 or 2 dignity and 1 or 2, in debility, right? So you can see if someone has no dignity at all, that's indicative of something. If someone has no debility, that means something. If someone has a lot of one or the other, that really means something. So those are things to really know about and understand. It took me years to like understand that. I kind of dismissed that for the first couple of years I was in astrology. Like I didn't study that at all. And it's only really recently in the last 5 years that I realized like, wow, those really mean something. Like if you have, I have Venus exalted in Pisces, and I have Mars is a rules Scorpio in the traditional system. Those are really mean something. Those planets are really powerful for me. I have Saturn in detriment in Aries, so that's a problem. Okay, Mercury. I was gonna whip through these, but I guess we're going a little deeper. Mercury, the glyph for Mercury, and it's really important to also look at the the sun and the moon. Well, the sun is actually Apollo, the sun god, but and the moon is of course a fertility goddess. Through so many pagan traditions. Now we have Mercury, also known as Hermes, right, which is the messenger of the god. And what was his job? His job was to travel long distances to relay information. So that's kind of sums up basically your symbolism of Mercury, right? Travel and communication. But also in the natal chart, what does Mercury mean?
Also your mental faculties, your mind. Like problem solving and logic.
Yes.
Communication.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. How you process information, how your mind works, essentially how your mind works. Like what type of intellect that a person will have. You can see, Mercury, for example, in Taurus is going to be much more slow and methodical and practical. Whereas Mercury in Gemini is going to be very quick and very, very, so Mercury has rulership in Gemini, right? So when you see Mercury in Gemini, you immediately know you're dealing with someone who's very intelligent. I mean, there might be other problems that might be afflicted by Saturn or Neptune or something else, but essentially, someone has Mercury in Gemini, you're dealing with someone who's very intelligent. And then, in other signs, Aquarius, it's exalted in modern astrology, but not in the traditional system. Also is very well in Aquarius. It does well in all the air signs. It's exalted in Virgo, so it does very well in Virgo, because Virgo is highly analytical, different than Gemini, not as, airy, conceptual, not as much about information and ideas. Of course, it's more Virgo's more practical, but I'm trying to think of Pisces. Mercury in Pisces. Mercury is about rational, logical analysis and intellectual, analysis, and Pisces is basically, is all about intuition and higher intuitive, non-rational. So Mercury in Gemini is quite impaired, and it is in detriment. It's in fall. No, it's in detriment. Yeah, in the traditional system. So Mercury in Pisces, has some serious problems with. Doesn't mean the person isn't intelligent, but it means that they're going to be a much more intuitive type of intelligence, poetic, intuitive. They're not going to be a scientific, materialist, rationalist. So yeah. Gives you lots of information about how somebody's mind works. It also represents the nervous system. Very important. And also mental and psychological problems and like belief systems, right? Belief systems and thought patternings. Whereas the moon is like how we got patterned emotionally. Mercury is our belief systems, our thought patterns. And and how our mind, and that is how our mind works. So if you're dealing with, how do I transform and change negative thought patterns? You're dealing in the realm of Mercury. Okay, so the glyph for Venus. So tell me about the Venus.
Means Bitcoin goes up. No.
Yeah, Bitcoin had a hot date with Venus over the last couple of days. But really, see, that's an interesting thing. Since you brought that up, see, the main thing right now for Bitcoin is that Uranus went direct, as far as I can tell.
Right.
Again, I mean, it's kind of amazing. I'll just tell you while we're talking, we'll interrupt this, and I'll just want to tell you something that where I'm at with it today, which is, I thought there was going to be kind of a little rally in late November, December that never happened. And what I think now is that, number one, the lunar eclipse, the solar eclipse on Christmas Day totally washed that out. And then Uranus direct. So the decline, the whole downturn basically correlates with Uranus retrograde now.
Right, because it started in August and it's been going
August
down
11th. Yeah. So Uranus went direct. So also Jupiter is conjoining the Bitcoin sun, and Venus is also made some really important aspects too in the Bitcoin chart, and also to Uranus today. Venus is in a perfect sextile to Uranus today, just general aspects. So that's all coming together in a good way for Bitcoin, and the effect of the Christmas eclipse is washing out. And like I said, I posted several times, I look at Uranus, it's like when it was retrograde, it was like he was on the bench, with an injury or something. And now he's coming back onto the field big time. So this is I wish I had seen that, because what happened was the rally peak came on Uranus trying the Bitcoin Mars in June, in early July. But it kind of sat up there, right, around 10 to 12,000 until Uranus went retrograde. So you could kind of say there was an in-between period there in July where we had peaked on the exact aspect, right, of Uranus trine Bitcoin Mars. We got the actual price peaked. It topped out right on the end of the exact aspect. But the decline didn't really begin until Uranus went retrograde. Right. So that was, that's one thing that I learned, that Uranus and Taurus is going to be a big thing to watch, the retrogrades and the direct stations now. So that's really interesting. But we use the smaller planets like Mercury and Venus now, and Mars we use for more precise timing, of the rallies and what Bitcoin is going to do. We also look at the moons. Bitcoin is very responsive to the full moon, so we have to look at that. Bitcoin historically, 9 out of 10 times, it doesn't do well during a Mercury retrograde. So we have to also look at that. So there's all these other factors to look at. But Uranus right now is the big picture, I think. So anyway, let's go back to my PowerPoint.
I wonder if that's financial in general or just specific to Bitcoin, because it's a technology financial instrument.
Well, a couple of things. Uranus and Taurus represents financial disruption through revolutionary new technologies.
Right.
Because Taurus is a sign of banking and finance and money. So that's number one. You've got that aspect. So that's working in Bitcoin's favor in general, just as a big picture generality. Number two, Bitcoin has those 3 major planets in Capricorn. So Uranus is basically trining all 3 of those planets over the next 24 months. So it's really, it's both active, generally speaking, symbolically, with the big picture of financial astrology, and it's also active very specifically in the Bitcoin chart with that stellium of Pluto, Mars, and the Sun. That's the main thing, that we have to look at, is the aspects to those 2 things. Now basically Uranus is approaching a trine to Bitcoin Mars for the next 2 months. So this is a time to be long. I went long a little too early. I thought it was going to be more, I had pegged it more to those exact transits of the South Node and Saturn. But it turns out I was wrong. We got the entry wrong, okay, which is okay. You can get the entry wrong. You have to get the exit right.
I don't know if I'm going to sell at the end of the month and try to go back in March. or just hold? I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm actually you're not the first person to ask me that, and I put that in the mid-January update that's going on it's going out tomorrow, because the thing is, I don't know when the rally peak is. I only have three possibilities. Number one, here's what you want to do. Okay, we made the right decision. I sold everything in late June, early July, and that turned out to be the right call. So I got my subscriptions doubled and everything. I looked like a crypto god for a couple months there, because I called that when everybody else was saying, no, this is the beginning of a big new rally and we're going back to 20K. And I said, no, you want to sell now. So I got that right. What I got wrong was the entry point. Now, like I said, you can get the entry point wrong. As long as you close out in profit, you don't care, right? You'll forget about getting the entry part wrong. If you whether you bought at 7 or 8 isn't going to matter if it goes up to 15, or 13. Back to 13. So I think we're going to be good on the entry, because we're already above our entry on my system, which I figured was an aggregate around 8,000 or 8,250 was what I think most of my subscribers ended up, maybe getting. And some of them got better and some of them did worse. But I'm saying like an average. I'm going to give an average entry around, say, 8,000, between 8,000 and 8,500. So if you got that entry, you're back above your buy price. So you're okay now.
Yeah.
So now going forward,
okay, mostly.
you didn't get that. Yeah, I mean there's going to be a variety of entries. Depends on how you allocate it, right? If you allocate it across my date range that I was encouraging the buy zone, you got around 8,000, 8,500, and then it went much lower. And I was underneath my buy price for 6 weeks. I wasn't too worried about it because I know Jupiter was coming. I knew Uranus was coming. People were sending me these freaked out emails like, "Oh, you totally wrong. It's going to go down to 3K." And I was like, "Look, man, don't get emotional. Just be patient, right? It's going to turn around. Just hold it." I mean, that's what you got to do in those situations. And I said that
prevented me from panic selling.
I said that in the newsletter. I said, be prepared to hold in case our forecast is wrong. Be prepared to hold longer in case you need to. In 6 weeks, I mean, I've held stocks for 2 years under the buy price, waiting for it to come back around. So that's nothing new. So anyway, so there'll be a rally, some type of rally peak around Jupiter conjoining the Bitcoin Sun. Then there'll be another one around Uranus trine Bitcoin Mars, probably. We can never say for sure. Now, after that, I don't know if the rally goes all the way until May when Jupiter comes up close to the Bitcoin Jupiter, or it could even go into August, the whole time that Uranus is direct. So here's what I'm saying is keep at least 50% as a long-term core position into 2021. Then you use between 20 and 50% for a shorter term position trading, based on the astrology, and see, you lock in some profits as we're moving around, and then if we see buying opportunities, you'll have some cash on the side. So that's how you want to think about it. You want to think about having a long-term core position now versus, and then having a short-term trading position, and keeping them really separate. One you're not going to mess around with until 2021 when Uranus is trine the Bitcoin Sun. That's like our long-term rally, that's our long-term rally peak that we're really looking at. And I'm not even saying that it could go on more than that, but that's like the really big aspect that I'm seeing. Like after that, Uranus doesn't make any exact aspects in the Bitcoin chart for a long time. So that Uranus two direct trines of Uranus to the Bitcoin Sun, 3 altogether, the retrograde one as well. So that that could be a long-term rally peak in 2021 and into 2022, actually.
Perfect.
After that, I don't know. I haven't really studied it. I haven't really looked at it too much. I know that's probably going to be really good because we already have the data on Uranus trine the Bitcoin Mars, and so the Uranus trine Bitcoin Sun should be a lot better. And of course, forgetting about astrology, if you're looking at Dave the Waves, long-term logarithmic charts, I mean, those are looking pretty promising too. So you want to just, I think, keep a core position that you're not gambling and messing around with. And then, you'll have a short-term trading position that, let's face it, we could be wrong. I mean, sometimes they're going to have to hold longer than you think. And there might be other times where we have to buy back in higher than we sold. It's possible. I mean, that's what happens when you're trading. We're not going to get it right all the time. The point is that we want to have long-term consistently profitability. But we'll have to take some losses occasionally. Hope maybe never. I mean, maybe I'll be so good that the planets are so accurate that we don't have to take any losses at all. And that's essentially what the Astro TA system is designed as, a kind of extra risk management on top of your TA. Anyway, yeah. So anyway, that's the kind of Bitcoin thing right now. But let's go back to the planets, Venus, and you said Venus was making Bitcoin go up. Yes. So, but the point there that that's a more like micro timing using the faster moving planets like Venus and Jupiter, but the bigger picture is Uranus right
now. Right. So it's supposed to be money and also love and maybe value in general.
Yeah. So Venus is the love goddess, right? So Venus is like all the good things in life. Love, relationships. Venus is all about relating and love. But yeah, it's also money, value system, and comfort with the moon. Like Venus, if you have an afflicted Venus, it's very hard to get comfortable. Or when your Venus is afflicted by transit, it's uncomfortable. So Venus has a lot to do with comfort and luxury and sweets and all the good things in life, like overindulgences and stuff like that. But yeah, basically, essentially, here's the love goddess. Yeah, how we deal with material resources and money. Represents wealth. It's a wealth and money planet. It's a major financial astrology planet. It's our soft spot. It's also artistic creativity. So if someone has a strong Venus placement, they may have a great artistic talent. So for instance, like Venus and a trine to Saturn, that would be someone who maybe would be like a sculptor, or just really good with their hands at woodworking or things of this nature, or painting, or bringing structure to form and beauty, putting beauty into structure and form. Now, if it was Venus was trine Uranus, they would be really unconventional and they might be actually quite brilliant. Medical astrology, Venus pathologies are kidney, female hormones, the genital, sexual organs, along with Mars, diseases of excess, and also sexually transmitted diseases. Now, the rulership is really important here. Of course, Taurus, Venus rules Taurus. So that's more like the financial, the money. Taurus is a big money sign, as we said earlier. Banking and money, comfort. It's a wealth sign. Taurus is a wealth sign. So that's the money aspect of Venus, whereas Venus in ruling Libra is more the relationship. Libra is the sign of marriage and love and intimate relationships. So Venus, of course, does very well in both of those signs. It's exalted in Pisces, and that's a more type of spiritual, unconditional love and compassion and empathy and sensitivity. It's highly romantic. It's highly poetic. Venus does exceptionally well in Pisces. It doesn't like Aries and Scorpio, which are Mars signs. So, of course, the moon doesn't do well in the sun sign, and Venus doesn't do well in Mars's sign, and Mars doesn't like to be in Venus signs. It's like kind of passing through a hostile, territory in a way. And it's in fall in Virgo, which is opposite the exaltation in Pisces, and that's like, Virgo is very reserved, and it's, the Virgin. So you get the love goddess in the sign of the Virgin. There's a kind of a bit of a energetic mismatch there. Although Virgos, of course, are not always virgins, I can tell you from experience, and they have a very profound earthy sensuality. So it's not necessarily a bad placement. Venus actually is very good in earth signs, including Virgo, but there is definitely, it's very modest, it's very shy, It's very reserved with their sexuality, very private, very picky and choosy about who they will be with. So it's not, it's different than Venus and Taurus. You have the very profound earthy sensuality. Okay, so Mars, of course, is called the lesser malefic, which basically means it's bad, but not as bad as Saturn. And bad in a different way. It's bad in a hot, irritating way, whereas Saturn is bad in a cold, blocking, blockage way. I just want to make sure, did I shut down all of those YouTube things? No, I didn't. So they're taking up a lot of bandwidth and